recording. Yeah, my volume was off, so perhaps I couldn't hear if somebody said that anything. I couldn't see that. Now I have started recording. Hopefully, you can hear me, I guess.
Yes, sir, we can hear.
Okay, all right. So, so the proof that I was doing in the class, I've slightly modified the proof, added a separate lemma that will simplify the proof. Okay. Okay, and in this lemma statement, there was a mistake which was pointed out to me by one of you, and so the green thing is what I had written in the thing which I mailed to you. But supremum of what? Supremum of x such that what happens? Not very clear. So actually it is this supremum of distance between fx and fz as x varies in the set z to b. Okay. So there is at least one point which varies where it is varying by epsilon or more. Okay. So suppose the distance between the function at z, so z is a fixed point and we are going from z onwards till b. If for all points it is less than equal to epsilon, then we don't do anything. But if it is bigger than epsilon, so there is at least one point here between z to b such that fx and fz are bigger than epsilon distance. So the correct, this is the wrong thing which I had written in my notes, but then we let the following. We take the infimum so in a sense, the first u for which this distance goes above epsilon. Okay. And let me try to put it in a so we look at this is the z. Okay. Then amongst from starting from z towards b, let's try to do a this is fz plus minus epsilon bands, and we are looking at after z, what is the first one at which it is crossing the band. Okay. So here infimum of u such that fu minus fz is bigger than epsilon. So in this case, it is very clear that u is made up of this part and this part on the x-axis. My drawing is not very clear, but I hope you understand what I mean. So amongst all these points where f of z and f of, if these are the points u, f of z and f of u is bigger, is changing, is difference is more than epsilon, we take the first such, the smallest such, and that will be so this will be my w. Okay. And the claim is that if the difference is above epsilon, so that means there is at least some point which is going above it, and now you are taking the first such, then at that point, firstly, the w will be strictly bigger than z, and fw and fz are exactly equal to epsilon. Okay. So kind of the picture should make it clearer that this is exactly what is happening. And the proof is that firstly, since the supremum is bigger than epsilon, so we wanted to avoid a case where, so this is A, this is Z, this is B, and my function is almost flat. So the infimum may simply be the set B. There may be no point within that interval which is going above this bandwidth. Then this conclusion will be false. Okay. So if there is at least one point before B where the distance between fx and fz is strictly bigger than alpha, then the first such point at which it happens will be above W, and Fw and Fz will be differing by exactly epsilon. And the proof is that since the supremum is bigger than epsilon, this set is non-empty. The set of U such that Fu minus Fz is bigger than epsilon is non-empty. So I should make the correction here as well.
Sir, could you please explain it on a separate graph?
This also will need to be corrected by the same way. Yeah. So, okay, let me see. Suppose this is my F. Okay. Now, the way, okay, let me change this set. Suppose this is Z. Then what is my Fz? Fz is somewhere here. This is Fz. Now, let us do the Fz plus epsilon, Fz minus epsilon. Okay. Now, what is the set of all U's for which Fu and Fz is less than epsilon? Fx and Fu and Fz. So the this will be one interval. Then, sorry, not this. So this interval where the line has gone above, the graph has gone above this line, Fx plus minus epsilon. Okay. So this will be one part. Then when it goes below My drawing is not so great, but after that there will be a part which is going down. Then there will be again a part where it has gone up. So amongst all these ones, we pick the earliest one. And the key things are that this point is strictly above Z, and at that point, the distance between Fz and that Fw is going to be equal to exactly epsilon. So that is the point. Okay. So here the point is that this set, I will correct that with exactly the one written here. This will come here. So this set of U such that Fu minus Fz is bigger than epsilon will be non-empty. So whenever we are taking the least upper bound and such things, we have to ensure that we are not taking least upper bound of an empty set. Or greatest lower bound or least upper bound, either way. So the infimum therefore will be defined. Once you have a non-empty set and it is bounded, so it will be defined. So there will be one such number W. Now, to begin with, W we will first note that this point W is not in the set A. Because if W is in A, that would imply that Fw minus Fz is bigger than epsilon. And of course, Z will not be equal to W because Fz minus Fz will be 0. So we get that W is above epsilon, is bigger. And so now what you do, you W minus 1 over n, W minus Z, if you do.
Sir, by epsilon, do you mean alpha?
Yeah. Fw minus Fz will be bigger than alpha. And now you write Vn to be W minus, so you approximate W slightly from below, okay? Then Fvn will converge to Fw. And since that as a result, Fvn minus Fz will converge to Fw minus Fz. And therefore, for large enough n's, F of Vn minus Fz will also be bigger than epsilon. And that will be a point below here, which will be above. So, which will be also, the distance will be above epsilon. So therefore, so if you see in this graph, now again that other page which I did. So what is happening in this one? This is Z, this is Fz plus minus alpha. And if I function so the set A will be from here to here, but not including the points here, because these points, the F at this point and F at Z are differing exactly by alpha. So this will be this open interval and some few other points. So now if our infimum is somewhere here, clearly we can go between slightly below that where we are still outside. That is the whole idea. Okay. And therefore you cannot obtain the supremum, infimum of that set, which is where f of u is f of w is exactly above is above this plus minus epsilon band. So the infimum will be equal only at these points, which are exactly alpha distance from fw. And the proof of that is, if not, you are strictly above, you can take a sequence where it is converging, and then that will violate that it is really the infimum. Okay. Yeah. So therefore, the set W is not in the set A. So if W was in a set A, by slightly going down, you can still remain in A, and that is violated. All right. So W is not in A. That is the first thing we have proven. Now, W is the infimum, W not in A. So now you go slightly above. That will be in A, because this is the infimum. So you go slightly above, there must be one point in between which at which fun and fz is bigger than equal to epsilon. There must be at least one point un in the group, in the set, where if not, if for all points between w and w plus 1 over n, this difference is less than equal to epsilon, there is no such point in the set A, then infimum will be w plus 1 by n. So the infimum not being w plus 1 on by n, or infimum being w, says that it must be at least 1 point. So our LUB and GLB, we discussed a lot on LUB, but I had written similar notes for LUB, that you go take any interval, there must be at least 1 point. So there we pick that point, call it un. So for every n, we can get a point un between w and w plus 1 over n, which belongs to the set A. And each of them is bigger than equal to epsilon. So the infimum, the limit will be bigger than equal to epsilon. So same way, we are in the same, in one breath we are saying that there exists a un which is strictly above, which converges, fun minus fz converges to greater than equal to alpha, and another one where it is converging to less than equal to alpha. So the two together will tell us that it is exactly equal to alpha. So going back to this, the first point, so the point, if you look at all points at which f is outside this plus minus alpha band and take the infimum, that better be on this line. It cannot be below, it cannot be above the function, because you can approximate that w from above, approximate it from the right hand side, such that fwn will be strictly bigger than fw, and fwn and fz will be bigger than alpha. So both ways we can band it, and we will get that this point must be exactly at distance alpha. F must be exactly at distance alpha. So the main contention is that if this set is non-empty, that was the condition earlier, namely that there exists at least one u such that fu minus fz is bigger than epsilon, bigger than alpha, then the smallest such u would be strictly bigger than z, and at that point fw and fz will be exactly equal to alpha, and that is what we have formally proven. There can be a shorter way of proving it. If somebody comes up with that, do write. to be. Okay. So once we have that Fw minus Fz is equal to alpha, then Z is strictly less than W will follow immediately because they cannot be equal. So because Fz minus Fz is 0 and which is alpha is strictly positive, will follow that Z is bigger, W is strictly bigger than Z. Now let us return to our main thing about uniform continuity using this framework now. We are saying that for all epsilon, there is a delta. So we start with A, the lower endpoint, and call it x0. Now, if supremum of f t minus f x0 as t varies between x0 and b, if this itself is less than equal to another typo here. Maybe I wanted to say epsilon by 2. Yeah. So if this difference is less than equal to epsilon by 2, I'll call x1 to be b. Otherwise, I will let x1 to be the first such where it is bigger than epsilon by 4. We have already argued that if there is at least one point which is bigger than epsilon by 2, there will be points which are bigger than epsilon by 4. So this infimum will exist, will be so successively. I'm going to keep choosing with this. So suppose I've chosen up to xj, then I will, and xj is strictly less than b. Then if this distance is anyway less than equal to epsilon by 2, I will call xj plus 1 equal to b. Otherwise, we will take xj plus 1 to be the first time the distance exceeds epsilon by 4. As in the previous lemma, if xj plus 1 is less than b, then f xj plus 1 minus fxj is equal to epsilon by 4. So in that framework, we start, as soon as you have picked a point xj, we look at xj plus minus epsilon by 4. So maybe I should, for consistency, this I will make these things epsilon by 4. So, so we start with x0 is a. Then we start from here, and first time from here we write down plus minus epsilon by 4 line and look at the first point after a at which we take the infimum, and that infimum will be this point. Then we look at this plus minus epsilon by 4 and again take infimum from the right hand side. So that way we will keep getting this is a. So FA, then we look at plus minus epsilon by 2 lines. Epsilon by 4 lines, plus minus epsilon by 4. Then you look at the first, you look at all points above the line or below the line and take the infimum. So that will be this one. So this will be my x1. Then I'll again plus minus, I'll go that way band and pick x1. So likewise, we'll keep picking successively x0, x1, dot, dot, dot. Okay. Such that the gap within each one is at most epsilon by 4. So if you have picked x1, x2 up to xj and xj is strictly less than b, we have still not hit b, then if from then on it doesn't deviate by more than epsilon by 4, we simply go up to b. But if it does not, there is at least one where it is going above, we once again take the first one where it varies between epsilon by 4 plus minus. So then xj plus 1 will be strictly less than b, and then this difference between these two will be exactly equal to epsilon by 4. And the point is that this must end finitely many times. If not, we are going to be getting a contradiction. And if we keep going on, what will happen? The points xj's is a sequence of numbers between a and b, and it is increasing. It is bounded above by b, and it is increasing. So it will have a limit. But fxj plus, if the limit is some, let me call it theta, I don't know what I've called it, yeah, theta only. Then fxj plus 1 will converge to f theta, and fxj will also converge to f theta. But these two numbers are always differing by at least epsilon by 4. That cannot happen. So we'll prove that xj equal to b, xm will be b for some m. If no such m exists, or in other words, xj is less than b for every j, then this limit exists. We have an increasing sequence bounded above, so limit exists. And continuity of f says that f theta is limit of fxj. But this contradicts fxj plus 1 minus fxj is exactly equal to epsilon by 4. Because we can take epsilon by 24 as our number, then whenever there will be an n naught such that for all n bigger than equal to n naught, the points will be within epsilon by 24 of f theta. But that will be violated here. So what is the point being used here? That then you take successive values of an plus 1 and an, take f at that absolute difference will also go to 0. Because this is converging to f theta, this is converging to f theta. And therefore the difference must converge to 0. Yeah. So there are different proofs of the same experiment, this theorem. This proof is very specific to unit interval on real line. This doesn't quite work if you have unit square. The result is true even on unit square, but this proof is specifically for unit interval. Okay, and the point is only that we'll successively take first such point where it is bigger than epsilon by 4. x1 is the first time that fx0 is minus ft is bigger than epsilon by 4. If there is at least one such point, if there is no such point, we stop and take x1 to be b. But if there is at least one point, we call that x1. And now repeat. Now look at x1 and now look at the first time you deviate from fx1 by more than epsilon by 4. If there is no such, we stop and we call x2 to be b. If not, we continue. And the whole point is that you cannot keep continuing infinitely many times, you must end. And that is the continuity. This can happen if your function is not continuous, then nobody is saying anything. It can happen. But continuity is what is important. And this is called uniform continuity, and we have proven that f is continuous on a closed bounded interval, then it is uniformly continuous. So, what we have done till now for continuity is we have defined continuity of a function. A function is continuous at a point if this, for a fixed x, for that x, for every epsilon, there is a delta such that within plus minus delta of the point x, points within the set E, fy and fx differ by less than epsilon. That is the definition of continuity at x. And continuity of a function is, it is continuous at every point. Okay. And earlier I had given a notice, noted that, let us repeat that here, that f from this is not uniform continuous. This is not uniformly continuous. The set 0, 1 is not closed. Okay. And the problem happens at 0. The problem doesn't happen at 1. You will keep, as you come closer and closer to 0, this deltas will keep increasing. For any fixed epsilon, the deltas will keep increasing. So you can check that for this unit interval function, fx equal to 1 by x, if I give an epsilon, how will you compute the delta available? And you will see that the delta will depend on x. You cannot choose one x. Delta which will work for every epsilon. Epsilon, you can, I'll take even as a 1 by 0.1. Even for epsilon, which is like 0.1, you can't get a uniform bound. Okay. But take some polynomial or e power x, or we have not talked about e yet in the class, so let me avoid e power x. But type any polynomial. This is still an open interval 0, 1, but this is uniformly continuous. So we are not saying that uniformly continuous only if it is a closed bounded set, but if the set E is a closed bounded set, then it is uniformly continuous. Okay. How do we show that this is uniformly continuous? Well, I can always add 0, 1, and I'll call a function g, And I'll write for G the same mathematical formula that I had. G of x equal to same x power 7 minus x square plus 100. So for every point in the unit closed open unit interval, fx will be equal to gx. G is uniformly continuous and f is a restriction of G, so f will also be uniformly continuous. Whereas in this example, if I go to G equal to 0, 1, I will not be able to get a continuous function on closed interval 0, 1, which will extend this function fx equal to 1 by x. But how will you define G at 0 so that the function remains continuous? You can't. That is where the uniform continuity fails. Okay. And then I just that earlier classes we have proven continuity if and only if sequence. This is called sequential continuity. That is, for every sequence xn which converges to x, fxn converges to fx. And then we have talked about uniform continuity. Closed bounded interval, continuous function, then it is uniformly continuous. So here is the next important theorem on continuous functions that we are doing. So once again, closed bounded interval AB are in real numbers, a less than b, and f b is to r is a continuous function. Take 2 points u and v in AB, and suppose C is a point such that fu less than c less than fv. Then there exists a z such that fw equal to x, fz will be equal to c. So intermediate value. So there will exist an intermediate value at which f is equal to the constant c. If u is less than v, then z can be chosen so that u is between u and z with u less than z less than v. Whereas if v is less than u, z can be chosen such that v is less than z less than u. So there is an intermediate value between uv such that z is the intermediate value and fz will be equal to fc. And here is a example which I had drawn out earlier itself so that I don't make mess while I'm drawing while teaching. So this is y-axis, this is x-axis, this is the set x equal to a, this is the point x equal to a, this is the point x equal to b, and this is my u, this is my v. Okay, so this is what I take. Y is equal to fu is this line, y equal to fv is this line. So let us take C can be any point here. C should be some point between fu and fv. So this is not fu, this is fv. Y is fv. Okay. Now let us take some point u between these two. What happens there? This is my point C. Our assertion is that there exists some point here such that f of z will be equal to f of c. Now, pictorially, we can see that there are actually 3 points here. One will be here, this will be one, and this will be one. Not just one, but there are actually 3 points where f of z will be equal to c. But doesn't matter. We are asserting that there is at least one, and whichever one you can pick using your algorithm doesn't matter which is the one you are using. Okay. So is the assertion clear that in a picture, what it means is you draw the curve y equal to fx. You look at put points u and v here on x-axis, x equal to u, x equal to v. You look at the corresponding f's and draw lines there. Now you draw any line in between the two lines that you have drawn. It will intersect your function somewhere in between. And intuitively, it is obvious that you are somewhere here and you are going here. You are here and you are going up here. You are below this line, ft equal to c. Y-axis is c. So you are below this line. Now you want to go above the line. So there must be some point where you will cross the line. You may cross it more than once, but as long as there is at least one where you are crossing the line, you pick that point and that will answer the question. That is the intermediate value. So perhaps initially when somebody wrote this, they just said, it's obvious. Well, but you have to write a proof. Any questions about this one?
Sir, could you scroll up to the statement once?
Yes.
Okay, sir, fine.
So given any point between the two, fu and fv, we will get a point z in the interval u to be v, but u can be less than v or v can be less than u, doesn't matter. But there will be a point which is intermediate to uv. We'll call that z, such that f of z will be equal to c. That is exactly this thing here. Okay. And I had drawn 2-3 lines so that even if I so we can pick it very close to here, even then the same thing will happen. Okay. Because you are, as far as you are below this line at u, and then you are above this line at v. So somewhere in between, at least one you would have crossed. And later we can actually count how many you have crossed and so on and so forth. You have gone up once, gone down once, and then reached that point. So from there, actually, you can conclude that there will be one point between you and the point where you have gone up. From then on, one point between from there till you come down. Once again, there will be a point where you will reach. So number of times also we can count later, but right now that is not our consideration. Our consideration is that there exists at least one point z where, and z is in between u and v, where this happens. And this I have drawn so that I can how do we show that there is, how do we choose a z? So what I'm going to do right now is describe on a graph what is written as a mathematical proof later. So what you do, I forget what symbols I may have used, but first pick the point u plus v by 2. And look at f at this point. F at this point is above. So what we do, we keep u to be as it is. So this will be my, next time what I will do is I will apply my thing only to this. We'll treat as if this is the point V. We will give a symbol for that, but we will treat this as our point. Okay. Next, what we will do, you take this midpoint of this u and this value. Midpoint will be somewhere here. Okay. This point has gone down. Even lower than. So from here on, we will pick these two as our points. I have not written out what is my C. So I have to, before I start doing this, I have to declare which is my point C. So C is suppose this one. Okay. See, what would happen is if after this I want to take x equal to u and y x equal to this as the point, then all along I am staying below the green line. Then it doesn't help. But at each point, one end is above and one end is below. And then you split it in half, and depending on the resulting one is below or above, you will get one above, one below. And we can keep doing it. Next, we will put some point here, and we would be coming fairly close to that point. May not be equal, but we'll be coming fairly close. But it may still be below. So the next step will be the half of this one. Then would have gone up. Then next will be midpoint of these, and so on. Okay. So the whole idea is that we are going to keep taking on the x-axis smaller and smaller intervals, such that at lower end point you are below, upper end point you are above. Because to begin with, at the lower end point you are below and upper end point you are above. There could be the other case where it will be exactly similar argument. So at somebody's suggestion, before writing down a new mathematical proof, I drew a graph and tried to explain what we are going to do on this graph, and now the mathematical statements will become easier to digest. So I'll come back to this in a minute. Let us read the mathematical statement and then we will come back to this slide. So we'll assume that u is less than v. If the other case we can treat similarly. What is the other case? That at the lower end point you are above and at the higher end point you are below. So more or less the same argument will work, but okay. So my W1 I take this as the midpoint. Okay. And if it has already reached alpha, I don't have to do a separate argument. So if FW1 is less than or equal to alpha, we want again alpha. I don't know where I got alpha. This is C, this is also C. We want to heat C, the point. Okay. So if FW1 is less than or equal to C, I'll take X1 to be W1 and Y1 to be Y0. While if FW1 is strictly above C, then I'll take Y1 to be W1. Yeah. So what would ensure is that f at x1 is less than or equal to C and f at W1 is strictly above C. Greater than or equal to C, doesn't matter. So at both ends, one is less than or equal to, other is greater than or equal to. And the distance between y1 and x1 is half y0 x0. Y0 x0 is uv, v minus u. So this was my, so the x equal to u also will call x0. This is y0. Y notation, okay, doesn't matter. Then this was my point W1. So we look at if FW1 is above, then we x0 y1 we call W1 and x1 is x0. So that's why we have ensured that the x with whatever index is below and y with whatever index is above. And we don't need to worry about strict inequalities, less than equal to, but convention wise, you can fix anyone. So that is what it is. That in our example, FW1 was strictly above C. So I brought Y1 to W1 and X1 is X0. If X1 is anyway less than equal to C and our Y1 remains strictly above. Okay. So the whole thing is right here that our purpose is to come up with xk less than yk such that fxk is less than equal to c, which is less than fyk, and yk minus xk equal to 1 by k times v minus u. In this example where u is less than v. And this is a sequential step. Each point from xk, yk to xk plus 1, yk plus 1, one of them will be equal and the other one is the midpoint. And which one is midpoint is clear from this graph. That if at the midpoint the value is above c, we move y and keep x as it is, and if that at midpoint it is below this, then we move x and keep y as it is. So successively, once we have this, if we can do it up to time k, then we'll also use this to do it for k plus 1. Okay. And then it is clear that the distance between xk and yk is going down to 0. So xk will and yk, both of them will converge to the same quantity. We will call that quantity z, the common mean of xk and yk. And what happens? F of w, xk will converge to f of z, and f of yk will also converge to f of z. F of yk is above, f of xk is less. So lo and behold, limit of z will be equal to c. That is the whole idea. We'll write a mathematical proof later, but understand the idea.
Sir, could you please tell this part again? And this xk is less than yk.
Yeah. So firstly, x0 is less than y0, right? By our, this is the case I am taking. Sorry, u is less than v and x0 is u, y0 is v. At v it is above, at u it is below. So x0 is fx0 is less than c and c is less than fy0. Then you take a midpoint of x0, y0, call it w1. Now, it is either above c or less than equal to c. If it is above c, then you call this as the y1, midpoint as the y1, and x1 is same as x0. So once again, fx0 is less than equal to c, and fx1 is less than equal to c, and fy1 is strictly above c. And distance between x1 and y1 is half of distance between x0, y0. And we keep repeating this again and again. So if you have done this up to k, then you look at wk plus 1 to be yk plus xk divided by 2. So midpoint of these 2 points. And either there are 2 cases, we will call this either xk plus 1 or yk plus 1. And the other one will remain as it is. And that bifurcation will depend on f at this point, is it below c or above c. So the point here is that if you have chosen it up to time k, satisfying these conditions, you can choose xk plus 1 and yk plus 1 also satisfying these conditions.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, I think you may mean to write yk minus xk is equal to 1 by 2 to the power k v minus u.
Oh, yes. 2 power k. You are right. Thank you. Because each time we are half multiplying it to the factor of 1 by 2, so it will be 1 by 2 power k. Yes, thank you. So this is an extremely intuitive proof. All we have described it at each time we cut it into half. On one side, you have up, down, the other. So for example, because it is happening multiple times, even if first step we make a mistake, we can still recover by taking a midpoint. Midpoint would have gone down, but we don't know that it will go down again. So don't do that. Okay. So even if I'm saying, even if you had called x1 to be w1 and this to be y1, midpoint of that you would have again gone below the line. But we don't know that. So don't take such chances. You divide it into 2 parts, and whichever is, if it is above, you move the next y to that point, and if it is below, you move x to that point. So either way, next step, your x will be less than equal to the green line, and y will be greater than equal to the green line. And you can keep repeating. So each time you are reducing the distance by a factor of half, and you are continuing that our, if x, so from here we would have chosen a y, xk plus 1, yk plus 1, such that xk plus 1 is less than yk plus 1, and fxk plus 1 will be less than equal to c less than f yk plus 1, and yk plus 1 minus yk x. Will be 1 over 2 power k plus 1 this. So if you have reached this step to time k, you can reach the same step time k plus 1. And therefore, you have done it infinitely many times. And you have xk, yk. And since the distance between yk and xk is 1 over 2 power k times the original distance between v and u, it is clear that this difference is going to 0. Xk's are increasing, Yk's are decreasing. Oh, I should have said this between. At each time, Y's are coming down, X's are going up. So limit of xk exists, limit of yk exists. Their distance is going to 0. So both of them will converge to the same quantity. Let's call that common quantity z, and that's it. Fz must be equal to c. And that is, now let us go over the written proof. Yeah. So I start with x0, y0, take w1 to be the midpoint, and if fw1 is less than equal to c, we define x1 to be w1 and y1 to be y0. And if c is less than fw1, then define y1 to be w1 and x1 to be x0. So we have note that x1, y1 minus x1 is this. Proceeding similarly, if you have chosen xj, yj for such that fxj is less than equal to c less than fyj, and xj is greater than equal to xj minus 1, yj is less than equal to yj minus 1, and their distance is at most is equal to 1 by 2 power j y0 minus x0. Then we define yj plus 1 to be midpoint, and in this again the bifurcate the same way. F wj plus 1 is less than equal to no. This is my medical issue which happened, that I mean something but I write something else. Terrible. Still wrote alpha only. C. We define, we update xj plus 1, and while if it is bigger, then we update yj plus 1. Keep the xj please. And then we can just note that these properties continue to hold. So if you have got a xj yj pair up to time j, this is holding, then at g plus 1 also it holds. And therefore, we have got a sequence. Thus, both the sequences xj and yj converge to the same limit, which we define to be z. It follows that fz is c. Sir, is there a proof that xk plus 1, yk plus 1 are finite sequences? What is finite sequence? Bounded sequence, you mean, is it? Milan?
No, sir. Sir, I mean, sir, in this case, we are proving that it is converging to
Z.
Yes, sir.
Ah.
So is there a proof where we can construct a sequence that is like finite?
No,
In the
finite
finite-
time, you both will not be equal to Z. One of them maybe
Sir,
can be
not
equal to Z.
exactly like this proof itself, but another proof.
No, you will not have a proof where you will reach it in finite steps.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So, for example, I'll give you a thing where I can prove for you that you will never reach it in finite steps. Okay. So, let's say you have some uv. Your f of u is equal to 2. F of u is 2 and f of v is 4. Okay. And my c is a irrational number between 2 and 4, something like square root of, something like e, the sequence, in fact, anything which is not a not a rational number, any irrational number between 2 and 4, you pick c, then you will not be, and repeat this step, you will not reach that infinitely many times, because finitely many times your xk's and yk's will always remain rational numbers, because the distance u and v, these are rational numbers and their distance is rational. It's integer. If u, v, fu, fv, all of these are rational numbers, and the point c that we pick is an irrational number, then using this way, you will never reach that point at a midway point, infinitely many points. Does that answer you?
Sir, I was not thinking of exactly like this proof itself, like some kind of proof.
So, okay, one thing is there can be different proofs. Some book may have a proof where you may be reaching it infinitely many times.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you.
We are not ruling that out.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So, there can be proofs where you will reach infinitely many times, no doubt about it in my mind. If one of you write such a proof, share it with me or share it with everybody. So here is another point that, if you have seen one proof, is there any point in trying to find another proof? Right? Yes, because in some other case, this proof may not work, but that proof may work. Who knows? Okay. So as many different proofs as you can lay your hands on, you should read or write or understand. Doesn't matter. So yeah. So as far as what I was wanting to do in today's class was mainly this intermediate value theorem. It is one of the very important results. And at this moment, you may not see what is the importance, but when you go to differentiation, suddenly we'll see this being used left and right for deriving properties. Very briefly, I have not written it out also, that the other case, namely, if I have taken FU to be smaller and FV to be larger, in which case my other case will be that V is smaller than U. So at the smaller endpoint, you are above, and at the lower endpoint, you are above. So the other way. So therefore, the same proof will be repeated. There are ways people will use notations where you don't have to write the proof twice, but while drawing, you have to draw twice. You can rewrite the proof in exactly once, but so yeah, so somebody had suggested whether I could, wherever possible, at least instead of giving just notational proof, can I give a geometric proof? And I hope today's proof you would have seen it geometrically, and then you can digest the symbol proof much better. Okay, and do share any feedbacks you have either in the class, or if you don't want to share it with everybody, just write to me. What may happen is I may say, that is not doable, or sorry, I can't do that. And if I can do that, I will do it. Okay. So continuous functions, what is it that we have done? Let's quickly review. Definition of continuity. Okay. And continuity at a point, continuity or continuous at the entire set. Okay. Then we had shown that continuity can be done in a sequential manner, if and only if that function is continuous on the whole set, if and only for every sequence which converges to some point in X, some point X in the set, Fxn converges to Fx. We can rewrite this also that F is continuous at X if and only if whenever Xn converges to this X, Fxn converges to Fx. So somehow in my mind, I like the notion of continuity on a set rather than at a point, but It's only a point of view. You can write whichever way you want. Then we came to the important part that if f is a function on the closed and bounded interval and is continuous, then it is uniformly continuous. So the next thing I'm going to say is not really for this course, but those who want to spend some time trying to do such things. Try to show the following, that if you have a collection of open intervals whose union contains A to B, this closed interval AB. So that's called, you have a collection of open intervals whose union contains A to B. That means those intervals cover the set AB. Then there will be finitely many out of those which themselves will cover A to B. We are not going to do this in this course. You will certainly do it in either second semester itself or later. But that is what is called compactness. That if you have a, that is called a, if you have a open cover, that means you have a collection of open sets which are covering that set, then there will be a finite subcover. That is how it is written. But it's not for this first course. The proof will be on the lines that, some line you will see. Okay. Yeah.
Could you just go to the second slide of the like today's lecture? Like the very first lemma that you talked about.
Okay. So, the lemma in the previous sessions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the previous.
Okay.
No, sir, no doubt. I just want to see the slide once.
Sure. Proof given in class. Yeah, this one.
So next, the next slide.
This one?
Next one. Yeah.
Yes, so I guess some of you, I mean, you all have a class at next one. So those who want to leave, please leave. I'm not going to do anything new today, of course, after this, but.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
you, sir.
free to write to me, giving suggestions. I may accept them, may not accept them, but. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. So close the session because you all have a class in any case. So